Welcome to Traders Post office hours for February 25th, 2025. I'm Tom Hartman, marketing manager here at Traders Post, alongside Mike Christensen, our co-founder and CSO, and John Wage, our founder and CEO. We're always working to make Traders Post better day in and day out. Each week, we take a deep dive into all things Traders Post, answering your questions, gathering your feedback, and helping you get the most out of the best automated trading platform in the known universe. We've collected your questions over the past week, so let's dive in. How's it going, gents?
What's up, guys?
Doing well. John, you look like you're really cold over there.
I was actually just telling Tom, like, we got our first fake spring this week, so today's high is 50. I was spending time outside this morning.
Gotcha. Quick fix. I think, John, your microphone is not selected to the shirt in front of you.
All right.
50.
You guys' temperature. Every time American speaks about temperature, I have no idea what they're talking about.
And it's one of these weeks here in Colorado where things are moving up and down really fast. So we'll have a 60, 65 degree day, and then the next day it's 20 degrees or less. So it's that time of the season for us where the weather can't make up its mind.
I keep trying to make the case, folks, that we built indoors because outdoors is terrible. And eventually I'm going to convince you snowboarders that there's nothing better than virtual snowboarding in VR.
It's going to go the other way around.
I actually saw a place the other day. It was indoor snow facility, and I was like, this is amazing. But it's still cold. You're just inside.
Right. Well, we'll fix that. All right. So last time we went through a bunch of nice updates that we saw for the platform. I just thought it might be nice also to take a look at the new modification for the connections page here on TradersPost. We wanted to make it a little bit easier for people to understand what features are available for certain types of brokers, and some of them are specialized in one thing or another. It might be nice to have that distinction. So there's been a modification made to the connections page on TradersPost that goes through that. It's actually very pretty. I'm very happy I'm a big snob for custom fonts, so I'll just put that in there that I'm really happy about that. But you have the ability to switch between the different asset classes now to see which brokers are available for that.
And more importantly, what we didn't expose before was which feature was available for that particular asset class. So that's now available as well. If you're curious if the take profit and stop loss functionality works with TradeStation on both futures and options, you can just walk through it that way. And so that type of breakdown wasn't really available on this page before.
So if you click click all connections, and then scroll down, you'll see that on Alpaca, the take profit legs and stop loss legs column there has the dashed check mark. That's because Alpaca doesn't support those features for crypto and options.
Right.
They only support it for stocks. And like Mike said, we didn't show that before. So people would pick Alpaca, they're trading options, they'd see that it supports those things, but then they go to try to set it up on options and it wouldn't work. So now you get more information about that. And
Excellent.
Yep.
So always happy to make these. John's always making the point that incremental changes add up. You get them out the door, and next thing you know, you look back a year from now, and things are completely different. And he's right. He's absolutely right. All right, so let's take a look at some of the questions we got this week. Actually, we had a nice little shout out from David, who says, I just wanted to say I love the new updates, and the slippage stats in particular are super helpful.
Thanks, David.
This
awesome.
is unpaid and unsolicited, but obviously welcome.
I know we kind of covered the slippage insights a little bit on the last call, but just as a reminder, we now make it possible for you to see how different your entry price is from the signal price that you originally sent, as long as you're sending the signal price at that time. That does make it pretty helpful to know what the disparity is between the time that alert triggered on TradingView and the time that you actually got filled with the broker, because there's a small disparity between those two moments.
That's right. Yeah, people were. We had a run of questions about slippages, and we didn't have like a one size fits all. I even tried Googling it. Okay, what's the average slippage for a particular asset in its particular time frame? Don't have that information.
Yeah, there's not a lot of data that covers it because, not a lot of trading data is very public. And this is also kind of a different scenario. So you have slippage that occurs just from executing an order by itself with the broker. That's a certain type of slippage, especially if it's a market order. And that basically has to do with market dynamics at the time. How filled is the order book? How many sellers are on the other side of your buy or buyers on the other side of your sell? And if you're submitting a fairly large order, you could actually end up with price discovery that's much worse than you were anticipating. That said, we have another factor that is involved in using TradersPost, which is the time factor involved in slippage. The time it takes from the alert to be fired to the time the webhook request is made to the time we receive that and then translate it to an order with your broker and then execute the market order. That can result in an additional slippage that you may not have experienced if you were executing the order, as close to the books as possible.
Right.
So those two factors together make it useful to understand how much slippage is involved with each of your trades as you go through as many as possible. And it just creates another opportunity for us to remind customers that we're interested in the meat of the move. This is not a scalping platform or an HFT platform.
Yeah, I saw someone was talking about the other day. They entered in at like 85.01, and then they had their stop loss at 85. And they're like, "Why isn't this working? I need to keep it properly." Like, it's too
One
close.
penny of
It's not
slippage
gonna
is
work.
not enough. Yeah,
Yeah.
a little more.
Yeah. It was literally, it was 85.10. Sorry, 85.1, and I was like, "Wow,
Gotcha."
that's crazy."
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, you'll get 10 cents of slippage on a market order for sure. Sometimes more if it's a really volatile ticker.
Yeah,
That's
well,
right.
John, we were seeing this yesterday with MicroStrategy. I've never seen bid-ask spreads that wide before on such a large publicly traded company. It was like 15 to 20% spreads. No joke. That's massive. I mean, you could get filled significantly lower than you expect.
MicroStrategies, don't get me started. I almost want to talk about that on Friday. I went through their 10K. I went through all kinds of filings. Turns out, anyways, Bitcoin is already dropping enough. Let's not pile on to the maxi play here.
Well, I will pile on to the drawdown that MicroStrategy has now had. I mean, that was kind of the biggest warning that most analysts were showcasing about MicroStrategy is you'll see about a 50% or more drawdown from here. So hopefully you're not holding the bag on this one.
Oof.
And here we are.
All right. Next one. Hello, I am getting way too many timeouts with IBKR, paper trading. It's hard to gauge the accuracy of my strategy without having these work. Do you notice the same in live trading? Have others reported the same issue?
Unfortunately, yes. Interactive Brokers platform is really unstable. One of the core issues is caused by not being able to handle things concurrently. So if you're executing multiple trades at the same time in one account, you'll get those timeouts. We try to do things synchronously, one at a time, but we still get those timeouts. So in addition to the timeouts with Interactive Brokers, you also have a much higher average response time. Alpaca and Robinhood are probably two of our fastest brokers. Their average, just for comparison's sake, their average response time is like sub 50 milliseconds. It can be like 20 to 30 milliseconds most of the time. Interactive Brokers is like 500 milliseconds, sometimes higher. So we'd love to improve it, but we don't know how to. And Interactive Brokers hasn't been really open to our feedback about the reliability and the speed of the system. Maybe they're taking the feedback, and Mike and I were talking the other day that we're hoping they're working on a new API that can rival some of their competitors. But that's just us speculating what we think would make sense for them to do.
You'll have to remind me, but we feel like we heard something on a call about something they were developing. We don't want to spread rumors here, but we do think they're working on something. We're just not quite sure what it is.
Yeah, they did reach out to us about a year ago, and we did like a survey with someone who is performing research about their API. And I gave them a bunch of stats about their API, failure rates, average response time. So I gave them all that information. And it seemed like the context of that was them collecting information before they started the development of some new API. But the core of the issue with interactive brokers is that their API is actually running on top of Trader Workstation. So they literally have like Trader Workstation app running in the cloud. And when you send an API call, the software is just kind of proxying through Trader Workstation. So that's why it's not possible for you to do two things at once in parallel, because it's not possible for two people to be using Trader Workstation to like trade two separate tickers at the same time. So they have some kind of locking mechanism that means that if one order starts in, say, like we send an API call to the broker to create an order, and then in another process, we also communicate with interactive brokers to create a different order on the same account, those two processes are like competing with each other, and only one of them can run at a time. So while one is running, the other one sits there and waits. But we can only wait for so long. We can't. Our system has a limit on how long we'll wait before we give those timeout errors. And that's a normal thing for any system. Like you can't have processes where it could potentially just hang forever, because it'll clog up the system. So ours is 5 seconds. We'll wait for 5 seconds, but then we also retry, and we'll retry up to one time. So the most we'll wait is basically 10 seconds before we give up, which is honestly, that's a lifetime.
A long time.
I mean, 10 seconds is insane. Like our average internally, our average response time, like when we receive a trade, we start executing the trade less than 50 milliseconds, more often like 10 to 20 milliseconds. So 10 seconds is just insane. I don't even know how that's possible, frankly.
Oh my goodness. So I've always thought of having making the pitch that on interactive brokers, error pages debugs is a permanent message at the bottom that suggests a different broker to use if you're having a problem with this, because it just comes up again and again. There's not a week that goes by where someone doesn't have the problem with it. Ugh.
I think most people don't have another option, probably, right? People who want to trade U.S. stocks and they're not in the U.S. and like interactive brokers is it.
Yeah.
So
it's the only one I can
kinda,
use.
They're kind of forced.
We are exploring some of those other international brokers that offer Canadian, UK, and Australian support. So, one avenue here to support those folks is to figure out what other brokers we can integrate with. So we'll continue to look into that.
Awesome.
So are we on a first name basis now with a Ventura Trader? Is that who you're saying?
We have been for some time. Trey's
Nice.
here on as many episodes as he can get to. I always like seeing that he says, "Hey, I made it to another live one."
Yeah, he's always here. He's like here from the very beginning, and he's always here. So that's cool, man. Nice to know your first name, Trey.
For sure. And always appreciate the shout outs you give us on Twitter.
Yep.
Or X. What are we calling it now? Is it?
I call it Twitter X.
Sorry, guys.
I'll forever call it Twitter.
All right. Next up, what does the error fractional quantity cannot be used with stop losses means if I'm trading crypto? Don't I need to have the fractional quantity option enabled?
Let me see. What does error fractional?
So this user was trying to do a stop loss, and they had fractional quantity enabled, and they couldn't get it working. I tried it, and I could get it working. So I just wanted to know if maybe you've seen this error before.
It's not an error. I don't think that's an error that comes from our system.
I was going to say, Tom, do you have the ticket for this one?
There was no screenshots. There was no, I can get the ticket, but there was no.
Got it.
Well, so I was trying to search our code base for that error message. I don't think that comes from us. I think that comes from
one of the brokers,
Alpaca. Mm-hmm. And kind of what we were talking about earlier, Alpaca doesn't support those advanced order types for crypto. So you basically can't do stop losses where the stop loss is sent with your entry order. Excuse me. So you'd have to basically wait until your stop loss is hit in your strategy, and then that would send an alert to TradersPost, and then we would exit the position. So it's the same net effect. It's just your stop loss isn't in the broker ahead of time.
All right. Well, I sent you guys the ticket. If everyone want to take a look at that later on. All right. Next up, can we add the asset class to the subscriptions list? So that's on the subscriptions page. Let's pull that up real quick.
So yes, we can.
Because it's on the strategies page for stocks, crypto, and stuff, but not on the subscription.
We show on the subscriptions list, we show the badge of the broker it's connected to. And on the strategies list, we show the asset class badge, but maybe next to like enabled and the auto submit badge there, we can show the asset class.
Yeah, I thought that might be interesting.
Yep.
All right.
I think we had a conversation about that as well, in addition to the asset class showing as much information as we can fit on the list,
including probably the last 4 digits of the broker in question.
Yep,
that's right.
Yep.
Okay. Why can't I use amount per position or percent of equity for futures trades? It always says futures does not currently support dynamic quantity calculation methods.
Yep. So the futures are a bit different than crypto or options or stocks, where the amount of buying power that's required to buy one contract is not the price of the asset that you're trading. It's the margin that's required. So you could be trading and I don't know what the prices are off the top of my head, but like if I pull up NQ, the price is 21,200 right now. Doesn't mean it costs 21,200 of buying power. There's a margin requirement, and that margin requirement changes. And we just don't have that data at the moment, and we haven't found a way to get that data so that we could calculate if you have $100,000 and each contract costs 10,000 just for simple math, and you wanted to use 100% of your equity, then we could afford to buy 10 contracts. That math is easy when it's any other asset class because the price is the amount that you pay. It's not the case with futures. So if we're able to get that data in the future, something we've thought about is maybe a place where a user can input the margin required.
But it would require ongoing changes, though. Margins change every single day.
Yep.
So, yeah, we would need it to come from the API to keep it perfectly dynamic.
And they don't surface the calculation for how that margin is generated.
No, and it changes. Yeah, and it changes based off of volatility. Like, I think they even will change it, on news days. Like, there's all kinds of reasons why they change it. Yep. Mm-hmm. So we'd love to improve it, but there's just no technical way to do it at the moment that we've been able to figure out.
That universally works across multiple brokers. I think this might be available with Tradevate, but we'd have to figure out a way that makes it work for all futures brokers. And
each broker can set their own margin requirements too, right? That's not something that exchange sets. Yeah,
it's why people go to different futures brokers, because usually the margin requirements are less restrictive.
And you said something about Tradevate. Maybe I'll have to check their docs. Do they have something that will allow you to retrieve the margin requirements for a symbol?
I think so. I thought I remember reading that, but we'd have to double check. That said, it may not be consistent with the other futures brokers that we have integrations with, and it can change from broker to broker. We just have to figure out how to make it consistent across all of our integration types, which is the bigger challenge.
All right. I think we had this question before. I'll ask it again. Now that Robinhood supports futures, will that asset class be available for the Robinhood integration on TradersPost?
I didn't know that they added features. I saw that the other day. Someone asked me about that.
December they added it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest. Our Robinhood integration, it's not like other integrations, to put it simply. So unless, basically, we probably won't do it unless Robinhood allows, builds a futures API that we could integrate with. And as of right now, it doesn't seem like they do. The only API they have that's public is the crypto API.
I see. Okay. What's the thinking behind these trading trade plan messages. Keep in mind that I currently have Tesla open position. So this is what it was. So the question here is these three messages that are appearing here: no Tesla orders open to cancel, cannot exit open position Tesla position because the signal is not an exit signal. So those two first ones, is there a reason why that's being surfaced to the user as opposed to, not surfacing that information because there's nothing there to be done?
Well, when you have a trade, there's basically three things that a trade can do. The first one is it can cancel orders. The second is it can exit an open position. And the third is it can enter a position. So each one of those messages is basically like, why did it get rejected? And it got rejected because there were no open orders for Tesla that we found that we needed to cancel. We couldn't exit the open position because the signal was not an exit signal. And the third is we can't enter. What does it say? Because they don't allow adding to position. So there already is a bullish long position open on Tesla, and the signal that you sent is to go long Tesla, but there's already a long Tesla position. So that's why the trade was rejected, because of those three reasons.
But the rejection, isn't it just because of the third one and not because of the first two?
No, because if there were orders to be canceled, then it would cancel those orders and it wouldn't be rejected.
I see.
So like the only reason we reject a trade is because basically when we planned the trade, there's nothing for us to do. Like we fetched the state from the broker, we compared the signal to the data that's in the broker, and we determined that there's no action to take. And that's why it was rejected. But I think
the user did have at the position active. This would show us completed, but then it would still say no Tesla orders to cancel.
Right. There would be notices. Yeah, they're basic. Those first two messages would still be there to explain why no orders were canceled and why it basically entered instead of exited.
Got it.
And I think the root of what the customer or whoever was asking this is, I think there's still more work to be done to improve the language, like how those messages are written and probably how they're presented to make more sense. Obviously, because I think people still get confused by it.
Right.
The only thing I was thinking is that if they were reversed, or like you only saw the last message, and if you click to see more, then you can expand the trade message. Because what I find often is that people they see a bunch of information over there, they read the first couple of things, because there's always three, and then they just cancel out. They stop reading.
Maybe they do need to be reversed. I mean, they're shown in the order that they're calculated, basically, because the trade planning mechanism goes in that order of like fetching the orders, fetching the open position, and that's the order that the trade planning works in. So it just naturally gets outputted in that order. But we could definitely do something more to either just simply reverse the order or something more specific to display those messages separately in some other visual kind of way to like separate them distinctly.
What if they're on the right here in the trade execution?
It could be. Yeah, I'm sure. I think this is the basically what the problem is like how to present the information in a way where it conveys all the context as quickly as possible so that people don't get confused. It's really a UX design problem.
I think it's the way I've always looked at it is they're kind of pre-flight checks. Whether or not you're ever going to do a certain thing or it's ever going to be required is still one of the checks you go through before you take off. And in theory, we could make a UI improvement that kind of steps through all those pre-flight checks so that you're aware that we're going to be checking this regardless of what's coming through. And now that step has been completed, now you're aware of whether or not it was needed and had a connection to the way the rest of the trade was executed or rejected. So there's kind of a flow chart involved in this whole process, and the checks go through pretty much the same way every single time. It's just once a certain property is observed about your JSON message, it just ends up on another branch. And then that condition is then met. And then we move to the next thing. So there's probably a way to visualize it where you can kind of get a sense of how our trading engine actually works. And you're aware of why it goes through that every single time.
Yeah. And part of the reason to why we added that, we didn't have those messages in the very early days of TradersPost. And people would send a signal to TradersPost and it wouldn't do something.
Right.
And they didn't know why, but it was usually because like maybe their strategy was trying to exit a position, but the position that was in the broker wasn't the same position that their strategy had. So it didn't do the same thing that the strategy did in TradingView.
Mm-hmm.
And without that context, they wouldn't really know why TradersPost made the decision that it made. It would show trade was rejected with no explanation as to why.
Oh, it's definitely useful to have the information. I mean, in support, you're there constantly reading that information, so that makes sense. All right. Next up, if a broker doesn't support bracket orders, could TradersPost instead send limit orders for the take profit and stop loss right after the trade enters?
We've thought of
this one a few times.
Yeah, we've talked about this one all the time, but there's bracket brokers don't consistently give you the ability to submit a bracket order separately from your entry. So we could submit separate orders, one for your take profit and one for your stop loss, but they wouldn't be bracketed together as an OCO, meaning that if your stop loss fills, it cancels the take profit. So
be left open.
It would be left open, and then that take profit could potentially be an entry then, because your position would be exited, the stop loss would be filled, and you'd have no open position anymore. And if that price comes back up to where that take profit limit price is, it could end up filling you and entering a position.
So we could explore it as we get closer to observing orders as they get filled in real time, which would allow us to observe that the stop loss was filled, triggers an event on our side to confirm it was filled, and then basically create our own version of an OCO order. But it's going to be an enhancement we would have to make much further down the line.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I've thought about that gets complicated is like, I think the only broker that enforces this, and it's not a problem because we don't support them, but Schwab has something in their terms of service about not allowing you to do that.
Oh,
where you basically can't implement your own order types by watching feeds of data and then doing things dynamically based on that. You're not allowed to do that.
I've seen other brokers and exchanges prohibit this behavior as well. They refer to them sometimes as algorithmic orders, where you're effectively listening to the market price or listening to order behavior in order to execute other types of orders. And if they don't support those bracket orders, there's a good reason why. It's usually because of the way that they handle the execution of orders across many, hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of clients. And so if you're doing it for them, that just adds to the overhead that they're trying to avoid. So we'd have to carefully explore which brokers would support us manually implementing or not manually, but implementing our own version of these algorithmic orders.
And I'm wondering too, there's probably some kind of like reliability argument, because they know that, WebSockets and things like that can drop connections, and like there's possibilities that like, yeah, we could build it, but there's no way to guarantee that we can make it work 100% of the time. Right. And you want it to work 100% of the time when you're dealing with a stop loss. Mm-hmm. So that would be the argument against why, and generally like why I personally want to avoid implementing it on our side, because I would be worried about our ability to do it well 100% of the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Unless
sorry, go
ahead, Tom.
So what you do is that you pair it with options, and that way you're covered if things go wrong.
Yeah. We'll just keep, it's like a layered cake. We just keep on layering complexity.
I just argue maybe no one should just ever use take profits or stop losses. Just YOLO until you get as much money in the bank as possible.
That's my kind of trading.
I'm
Liquidation
totally
only.
Kidding. Liquidation only.
All right. Here we go. Hello. I trade futures contracts based on an indicator that alerts trade entries in either direction. My strategy involves entering with one contract, but if my indicator alerts a trade in the opposite direction, I reverse that position and add an additional contract. I can get TradersPost to automatically reverse my position, but I can't figure out how I can get it to add a contract when it does. Is there a way of making this work through TradersPost?
Yeah.
You just have to manage the position and send the quantity manually. So instead of relying on side swapping feature on TradersPost, which is always a fixed quantity in either direction, you would have to send over the quantity you want to trade and use the offset feature, which is the subtract signal quantity from exit quantity feature. Is that right, John?
Yep. Yeah. So if you're long 1 and you want to end up short 2, you would send 3. We'd use one of the 3 to exit your open position, and then we'd use the remaining 2 to enter on the other side.
Yep. So you just have to do the math on your side and make sure that you're aware of how many contracts you need to offset by. With futures trading, what I mean by offsetting is this math involved in saying, if I'm currently 1 contract long and I want to be 2 short, then that means I have to sell 3. So knowing that offset math in PineScript and sending the trade over to TradersPost that way, saying sell 3, and using this feature of using the signal quantity to subtract from the exit quantity will allow us to sell the 1 long position and enter 2 short. There it is. Thanks, Tom.
So, and just for further clarification, the exit quantity is like the quantity that was exited from the position. So if you're long 1 and you send a quantity of 3, we're going to do 3 minus 1. And the 1 was the quantity of the open position. And then we use the difference, the 2, as the quantity to enter on the other side.
Yep. Right. Or said another way, 1 minus 3, -2. So now I'm going to be -2 short, right?
Yep.
Of course, we don't use negative numbers in quantity ever. So that's why John wrote it the other way around.
How can I receive order confirmations programmatically and not by email? Can you ping my webhook with the data when it comes in? Is there an order confirmation endpoint URL I can access, or do I need to integrate directly with my broker to watch for new positions? This is the API question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nothing at the moment. You'd either have to listen to your email, which is an option. It maybe not be probably recommended or reliable. Email can be slow. But we do want to add a generic alerting / notification system in the future so that you can basically relay events to other places. And that would include like relaying it to Discord or Telegram or relay it to a custom webhook URL.
Yeah.
And that would make TradersPost like in the same way that TradingView can send webhooks to TradersPost, TradersPost can send webhooks to other third parties to do things.
Oh, that'd be so cool.
It's definitely going to happen. Like it's not like we've decided we know we want to do it. It's just a matter of when we'll get to it on the roadmap.
Yep.
Because it's so nice the idea of being able to, like before, if I had a signal group, I would want that signal only to show up over there after I know it actually succeeded in my account, as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah, I think there's some prerequisites, like part of the work that we're doing with the analytics package. We're basically having to build out that WebSocket functionality that will listen to the broker to receive order updates. And that piece of infrastructure that is used for analytics could also be used for many other things. Like it could potentially be used for like Mike mentioned, with the take profits and stop losses. Knowing when the stop loss fills and we receive that order update, then we could use that order update to then go cancel the take profit order. Right. There's just all kinds of, it's like a core infrastructure piece that's not specific to analytics, but it can be used for a variety of different product features.
Mm-hmm.
All right, last question. I am having a problem creating a live subscription, copying my paper subscription. I try connecting live TradeStation. I hit save, and I get the following error message. This strategy is configured to only allow paper trading. Live trading is disabled by the strategy manager.
The message says it all. That's actually a new feature that was released a couple of weeks ago. So whoever strategy that is you're subscribed to, if it's not your own, they've disabled live trading. So if it's your own strategy and you uncheck that, you just need to go edit your strategy and check that.
Usually the thinking for that is that the strategy developer intends for this to be used in a paper account or a prop firm account. Most prop firm accounts are paper accounts if they're eval or quote unquote funded, until you get to live status, which is obviously pretty rare for most people on prop firm accounts. But those strategy developers feel a little more comfortable in the environment where it's just paper losses rather than real actualized losses. So using that feature, kind of prohibits the use of risk in a way that puts other people at risk. So it's just a comfort question more than anything. So I would reach out to the strategy developer and confirm if that's a policy they want to continue to enforce.
Excellent. All right. Well, that's it for the questions that we have for this week for TradersPost. If you guys want to ask any questions in the future, please put them in the YouTube comments, message us in support, or post them on Discord. But until then, we're going to send Mike and John back into the bowels of TradersPost, and we'll be back next Tuesday for more office hours.
Thanks, everybody.
See you guys.